welcome to the Dementia Researcher Salon. My name is Hannah Crouse. I'm a first-year PhD student at Carleton University, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to this session and to welcome the guests to our session, which is on the topic of funding opportunities beyond your PhD. So as I mentioned, the session is kind of like a live stream, there's guest speakers, and then the group kind of exchange. So feel free to use that chat if you'd like to participate, and we can save those questions for the end. So I'm going to introduce our guest speakers today. So the first person on my list is Professor Patrick Lewis from the Royal Veterinary College. Patrick is working to understand the mechanisms that underlie neurodegeneration in humans and animals. He is investigating the causes of neurodegeneration for 2 decades, working on Alzheimer's disease and the prion diseases and Parkinson's disease. I think I said prion, correct? And then we also have Dr. Kalisha Johnson, an assistant professor at Emory University Nell Hodgson Woodruff School of Nursing in Atlanta, Georgia. Kalisha graduated with a PhD from Oregon Health and Science University in 2019, and she's focused on decision-making process regarding healthcare services for African-American persons living with dementia and how these decision-making processes affect the quality of life. So both of our speakers today, you folks are very lucky for joining online, have a great reputation for supporting their students, and their advice will be very invaluable for those of us who are turning in or watching the live stream later on YouTube. And so starting to think about how the next level is financed, achieved, and we know that funding opportunities beyond a PhD are pretty vital as well. So there's certainly a lot of room for how we can think about this moving forward beyond the PhD as well. So today we're going to learn about some of these kind of diverse avenues available for securing financial support after graduation, helping answer some of those questions like, should you go straight into fellowship applications, stay in the same lab, what if traditional funding sources are not aligned with your research focus, and how you can leverage collaborations or alternative funding models to support your work. But that's enough for me. So I'm going to let you folks take it away. We were chatting about who was going to go first and that kind of thing. And we're on strict time. just joking, of course. But I'll let you folks go ahead and please take it away.
So Patrick and I decided that I would go first. I am Dr. Kalisha Johnson, as she shared. I do have a slide I'll run through, just kind of my presentation. There it is. And then hopefully there's time for questions. Let's put it in presentation mode. I can't see you all at all, which is interesting.
Peaceful. Just you.
A little peaceful. Yeah, I'm used to looking at someone's face, so I'll just stare straight ahead. So it looks like I'm at least looking in the camera, right? So again, the topic today is funding opportunities beyond your PhD. I will give you the USA edition because that is where I am. I have not received international funding, so I'll do my best to try to talk in general terms. I may use some terms that are more unique to funding in the United States. If I do, feel free to put comments in the chat and we can address that through the Q&A. So let's get started. I am a huge believer in, start my timer as well. Don't want to get in trouble. I joke, but I also do want to be mindful of time. So I am a huge sort of believer in orienting people to context. Context matters in everything, and it especially matters in research. So home is where our story begins. This is a wheat field by my home where I grew up. I'm originally from rural West Tennessee, which is it's very flat. There's a lot of farmland. A lot of my neighbors had livestock, so cows, chickens. We even had chickens, horses.
Sorry. I don't want to cut you off, but right now I see your main kind of thing, and you're describing a wheat field, and I see a little preview in that next one. So fabulous, okay. Fabulous.
So I see this, but what do you see now?
I see the home is where our story begins now.
Okay, and then if I do this, do you see my slide with different pictures?
I do not. I wonder if you put it into, right now I don't see it. It's almost like in the kind of format where you could edit it. I wonder if you put it into slideshow mode, if that would help you at all.
Slideshow on my screen, y'all.
Interesting.
Let me stop sharing.
Yeah. You're describing this wheat field, and I was like, well, I see a lot of cash.
That is not what I'm seeing. So this is my first time using share this way.
Oh, okay.
And I'm supposed to go to window. And then you see my PowerPoint when I share it. But then when I put it in, it's in slideshow for me now. Is it in slideshow for you?
It's not. It's just kind of hanging out in that, like we can see the sidebar and that kind of thing. We could always keep it open in that side, like where I'm seeing it in the sidebar kind of mode right now. Like we could keep it in.
When it's like this.
I know, hey? I wonder.
Anyone more savvy than I about... I don't...
Yeah, we're soliciting tech advice in the chat, so please, please.
So you all do not see my full screen.
Correct.
Huh.
I don't even see like
share a different way. Let me see if I share my whole screen. That was wrong. Let's see if I share. It won't. Let's see if I share my whole screen. Sorry, people, for everybody seeing yourselves. I'm just trying to see.
Don't you worry.
Is it a PowerPoint presentation now?
You bet it is.
Huh! And if I move forward, you see
Would you believe it? Sure do.
So share your whole screen, Patrick. That's what we needed to do. Okay.
Fabulous.
Sorry about that. So again, as I already said, I am Dr. Kalisha Johnson. I'll give you the USA version of my talk. Let me reset my time because that shouldn't count against me. And then we will get started. So again, home is where our story begins. I'm a huge person in believing that context matters. And so I am from rural West Tennessee, where now you can see the wheat field. And there's kind of a train in that corner that you can see. We live over a train track. And so just really thinking about where I came from, where I grew up. I'm a small town country girl until I learned a little bit more and became cultured and educated and things like that. But I did come from a very small town. I made mud pies and walked barefoot and caught butterflies. I had a very simple life.
Has she gone frozen for you as well, Patrick?
She has indeed, yes.
I think it's... I'll pop back. There's a fabulous story. I also grew up in a very, very small town.
Immediately.
Of African-American older adults, them watching me grow up, making sure I didn't get in trouble, I think has forever shaped my trajectory and the work that I do. Even now, as I think about my grandmother and how she's aged, I'm a nurse. I'm a nurse practitioner, a psychiatric mental health nurse practitioner, and now have a PhD. And so as I have seen her age over the years, my nursing background, being a nurse practitioner and clinician, has been really, really key in helping her navigate some different things. And I think it lended itself as I was thinking about where I was going to go with my research and my research trajectory. And so a little bit about me is I have worked on both ends of the spectrum. So as a registered nurse, I worked at Vanderbilt Children's Hospital. It's in Nashville, Tennessee. And I worked in the adolescent medicine unit. Sometimes they would send us over to the younger kids, but I really liked that adolescent age group and they were coming into their own. And so we had clients who had cystic fibrosis and, different mental health diagnoses, but really was just important in my career trajectory. And then I worked at the other end of the spectrum with older adults. So I worked in long-term care facilities, assisted livings, nursing homes, personal care homes for older adults. And I was main psychiatric consultant there. And so it was sort of, I think in both of these spaces where I learned both the importance of family caregivers, families being a part of the process when you're navigating an illness, as well as really sort of my childhood of being raised by older adults and it all coming full circle to be able to do that work in long-term care facilities or facilities where they're no longer living at home and are receiving their care in-house with other residents. And just being that psychiatric consultant for them, I started to see that dementia was this disease that many people didn't know a lot about, and the resources that were available, regardless of how good you might think they are, were things that many of the clients I talked to had never even heard about or never even been offered. And so that bothered me. And so I'll talk a little bit about my funding trajectory. I do start at my PhD because I think it's important to start there. I know the topic is beyond the PhD, but again, so I became a PhD candidate in 2018 through 2019. Is that right? Yes, I finished in 2018, 2019, started my postdoc in 2019. Sorry, I was just making sure the math was right. And so this is actually my regalia from my PhD program. But I just wanted to highlight, because again, it's 10 minutes, it's quick, it's an overview of some of the funding I've received, as well as some of the funding I didn't get, and some of the thought process that went in it. So again, the dean offered an award to all doctoral students. So I received the doctoral dissertation award as a PhD candidate for $2,500. I will say one thing that I have heard through the years is that money follows money. So even if it's a small pot of money, the first time you get some funding, just know that additional funding will come, because people like to fund people who have already received some funding. So even if it's $500 or $100, start putting that on your CV if you haven't already, because it does, it just encourages, I think, other people, once they see you've been funded, to continue to give you funding. I was also part of Sigma Theta Tau International, which is a nursing honors sort of group, society, chapter. I'm blanking on the name, but again, I was a part of Beta Psi chapter. And so this was for PhD students, where you could write to the specific chapter. We had what was called the Naomi Ballard Research Award. So while I was still in my PhD, started to get a little bit of funding here and there. That pot of money was a pilot project I ended up doing in addition to my dissertation work. And I did that as a PhD student again. So then I was awarded the SAMHSA so SAMHSA is a substance abuse mental health services administration, I believe. I should have looked that up before, but it's specific again for American Nurses Association, and they have a minority fellowship program. So again, finding different pots of money at your school or at other organizations is really helpful. This was sort of the largest amount I had got to date, $22,000. It helped cover part of my tuition, and also gave me a stipend to use to cover some different research things or living expenses that I had associated with being a PhD student. I will say I also wrote an F31, which is a fellowship grant to the National Institute so it's the National Institute of Health, but specifically I wrote it to the National Institute of Nursing Research. That was scored, but was not funded. And so that would have been huge funding to get a fellowship grant to help cover my dissertation studies, but I did not get it. So then we moved to my postdoctoral fellowship. Again, I did my PhD at Oregon Health and Science University in Portland, Oregon. I then did my postdoc fellowship at Emory University, the same institution I'm still at now. I know one of the questions is whether or not you should leave. I was always encouraged to go to different schools. And so my undergraduate degree as a bachelor's in science of nursing, my master's of science in nursing, my PhD, my postdoc have all been at different universities. The thought behind that is what someone told me. And again, it might work for you in your philosophy, it may not, but it was that if you're only at one institution, you only know that institution's way. And so you don't really push against it because that's all you know. But if you go to other places, you sort of get this broader sort of view of the way academia can work. And I think for me, it's been really nice to have those additional experiences. So again, in my postdoctoral fellowship from 2019 to 2021, remember I mentioned, I decided after writing that F31 or that fellowship grant that did not get funded in my PhD studies, I didn't want to write another big grant. We do have fellowship grants here in the United States where you can write as a postdoc, but I didn't want to do that. I did that, wasn't successful, was going to do something different. So we have what's called a T32 here, which is a training grant, but it's more for the university. So instead of sending your application to the National Institute of Nursing Research, I sent it to Emory, University, and then the University of Utah also had what we call a T32, or these training grants that are at they're at an institution, and so you apply to the institution. They have so many different fellows or scholars they can take, and I was accepted there again for the 124.76 was my 75% effort as a postdoc. I do highly recommend those of you interested in research considering a postdoc. It isn't a lot of money when you start thinking about stipends and really wanting to pay bills. But if you can swing it, it does become really nice leverage when you apply for your assistant professor position. And I did leverage it really nicely when it came to my salary. I also told you about, nope, not yet. So again, you're always looking for pots of money. So because I do work around dementia, the Alzheimer's Disease Research Center at Emory, Gosueta's Alzheimer's Disease Research Center at Emory have what they call a research education component. So definitely being on different listservs, getting different emails sent to you. I have mentors and colleagues and friends that will send me different things that may apply. And so this was another sort of pilot funding I ended up using to advance. So I've always been told that it's wise to have a couple of things you're interested in. They should all sort of make sense, but a couple of lanes, I call them pots on the stove. That's just my thing. I got 2 pots on the stove cooking. One is around African-American adult daughters and empowering them, because they are typically the ones doing the caregiving of their parents in the United States. And so I really wanted to focus on them. That came out of my dissertation work. The other thing is, as a clinician, I definitely know that depending on how well your primary care provider supports you, connects you with other resources, makes or breaks sort of your experience with navigating this disease process. And so I use this research education component to help sort of start that area of research where I wanted to focus on clinicians and primary care. And as my time is starting to wind down, I will continue on with where I am now. And that is, I have been an assistant professor at Emory since 2021. So I told you about that F31 that I wrote in my PhD that was not funded. Well, when I started my postdoc, there were a couple of things they wanted us to do. Get all of our publications out from our dissertation and consider writing a K award. K awards with NIA, or the National Institute on Aging, and the National Institute of Health largely are career awards. So they're nice sort of springboard pots of money that help us sort of advance your career from a postdoc on to assistant professor. And so that F31 that was scored but not funded, I advanced it up to where my thinking was after my PhD, wrote it, and it was funded on the first try. And so I walked into my assistant professorship with this pot of money. I've also been added on other people's grants. So here you'll see it's only 6%, but I'm a co-I on an RO1. And then I just received my, sorry, this is a trainee award. Again, looking for other pots of money. It's a KO7 from a mentor's mentor who was like, yes, I'd love to support you as you're figuring out next steps. And then last but not least, I wrote my first research grant that was awarded in July. We're getting ready to get that IRB approved and started. And so this is from the Alzheimer's Association. And so it is foundational money. Sorry, I guess that has been there the whole time. My apologies. You should hit hide when you share your screen. But again, looking forward to hearing questions, but just sort of showing there are different ways to get funding. And again, this is me. So thank you for your time. If you have any questions, find me pretty much on all social outlets as either Dr. Barnes-Johnson or Kalisha Barnes-Johnson. And
thank you.
Stop sharing. Sorry.
I love this like infinite.
Goes forever.
Exactly. That was fabulous. Thank you so very much. And I'll pass it over to Patrick.
Awesome, thank you. And Kalisha, thank you. What I found really interesting actually is a number of the themes that you've picked up upon are things that I was going to mention. So actually, I've got some of my time back because of what you covered. what I'll do is I'll sort of reinforce some of those, I think, as we go through. So I'm now going to try and share my screen. Let's see what we can do. Choose content to share. Presenter overlay. Let's see what we can do. Nope. Okay, let's just go with the share screen. And bunk. And we have infinity mirroring, which is terrifying. But hopefully, is that coming through now?
Yes, it is.
Hey, excellent. So, as Hannah introduced, I'm based at the Royal Veterinary College in London, which is the veterinary school for the University of London. Why I'm at a veterinary school and working on neurodegeneration would probably take up more than 10 minutes, so I'll probably gloss over that quite quickly. I thought we were talking a little bit about this on Monday, and I thought actually providing a bit of context as to my journey and where I've gone, what I've tried to do in terms of funding, where I've got my funding from over my postdoctoral years in particular, I think is a useful starting point for thinking about actually where do you get funding for research once you've finished your PhD. So I started way back in, I should probably have taken the start date off this, but I started way back in 1997 when I started an undergraduate degree in biochemistry at the University of Manchester. And I was very, very fortunate to spend a year not a million miles down the road from Atlanta in Jacksonville at the Mayo Clinic, working on cellular models for Alzheimer's disease. And that really hooked me into doing research and wanting to do research for my career. So coming back to the UK after a year, I decided I wanted to do a PhD. I ended up working on prion diseases. And Hannah, there's a continental divide here. And most of my American colleagues would say prion. Most of my British colleagues would say prion. So either works, and both would be understood. So I spent 3 years in London at the MRC prion unit. The MRC is the main UK government funder of medical research. So like a sort of mini version of a very mini version of the NIH. And at the end of all of that, when I got to the end of my PhD, I was looking around trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And one of the things, and actually, Kalisha, it was interesting, you were talking about that sort of tension between staying where you are, and that may be a country or it may be an institution, and traveling around and experiencing different types of research environment. And I was quite fortunate, actually. Some of my former colleagues from the Mayo Clinic have moved up to the NIH to set up a laboratory there. And after a couple of failed applications to other postdoctoral positions over in the US, and I'd made that decision, I was quite fortunate. I think I was at a point in my life where I was able to travel and to relocate to a different country to continue my research. I ended up going to the NIH as a visiting fellow. So this was intramural funding at the NIH. So it was the internal research program there up in Bethesda, just outside of Washington. And this was funded through a large block grant to the laboratory I was in. It was led by John Hardy. I was working with a laboratory head called Mark Cookson on cellular models for Parkinson's. And basically, my existence was funded through their very large block grant, multi-million-dollar grant. Actually, they didn't have much in the way of funding for salaries. So I ended up, and I'm not quite sure how they did this, but I ended up being funded off their consumable budget. So I don't know whether my postdoctoral fellowship there counted as a consumable or not, or whether I counted as a consumable. But I had 2 years working at the NIH as a visiting fellow, but that was not funding which I had gone out and got myself. This was a project that was funded through a much larger 5-year rolling grant to the Laboratory of Neurogenetics. Now, at the end of 2 years, for a variety of reasons, some of them scientific, some of them personal, wanting to be closer to my family and friends back in the UK, I moved back to UCL, and this is where I actually started transitioning to my own fellowship funding, and I was funded at UCL for 6 years through a variety of personal fellowships where I had developed my own own research ideas, mainly deriving from the work that I'd done at the NIH and building on some of the discoveries, some of the insights that I gained there, and use that to apply for my own funding. The benefits of that, of course, being that when you're progressing through, when you're applying for other positions, perhaps faculty positions, tenure track positions, and so on and so forth, funding which you can badge as being you and being your own is a very, very powerful signal that actually you're somebody who is able to develop your own research and lead your own programs. I actually ended up moving from UCL on fellowship funding to a faculty position at the University of Reading. Reading's just outside of London, and it's actually where I am right now. So it's about 30 miles to the west of London, and was there for 6 years before moving to the Royal Veterinary College. And the interesting thing is I've gone through that process, moving from being funded on other people's grants. When I was at the MRC Prion unit, I was funded by an MRC studentship that had been awarded to the unit, to the institution, and at the NIH, I was funded through the NIH intramural program. Moving from that to postdoctoral fellowships, where I was developing my own ideas, thinking about my own science, trying to develop my own program of research, then into a faculty position where the responsibility to get funding for my own salary actually had been removed, but I was now responsible for gaining funding and securing funding for other people's research careers. Actually, it's been a really interesting change in focus as you move through this. This will be similar to some people's journeys through an academic career. And one of the things I should highlight right at the start, I should have highlighted at the start, is quite often you have these sort of portrayed as linear paths. Actually, it's the very, very opposite of that. What isn't shown on this side are all the bits where I tried to do something else and I bounced back. So at the end of my PhD, I applied to 2 or 3 other postdoctoral positions over in the US, got interviewed for some of them, didn't get most of them, and you end up doing what you get awarded, what you get funding to do, what the positions that you're appointed to. And so it ends up retrospectively being this wonderful linear path, but actually in reality it's much, much more chaotic than that. And I think that's true of most people, certainly most people that I talk to about scientific careers. That's the case. Now, for me, the funding which I've had through my postdoctoral years from the NIH, from a small charity based in London called the Brain Research Trust, and then from the main Parkinson's charity in the UK, Parkinson's UK. These were, the middle 2 were individual fellowships. And actually, I've now gone back to a fellowship route where I'm funded by the Royal Society at the moment to work with an industrial partner. One of the values of having that fellowship or career support type funding is that it can allow you to, it protects your time, it allows you to focus on your research and really develop your own ideas. And this is a wonderful thing that you can do as a postdoctoral researcher, where you can really just focus all of your efforts on developing your research ideas. And actually, that's something that I miss quite a lot moving into a faculty position where you have administrative duties, where you have teaching duties, and so on and so forth. One of the things that I'm sort of jumping around a little bit here, but one of the things, thinking about how you secure that first bit of funding, that first bit of experience when you're out of your PhD, one of the sort of starting points of this, I think, is to recognize that actually the majority of people, when they finish their PhD, actually the majority go to careers outside of science. And I think it's always worth pausing when talking about careers in science to recognize that a PhD is, while it is training for an academic and research career, actually it's training for a whole host of different careers. This was a study that was carried out by the Royal Society, I would say, I'm trying to think, it was maybe 10 years ago now, where they surveyed UK researchers who had gone into, completed their PhDs and then gone off to further careers, and actually over half had gone to careers outside science. Now, for the half that remain in science, what are the different options? This is a wonderful interactive career framework that the Medical Research Council had on their website for many years, showing the different paths and different routes that you could take through a scientific career, going from PhD to postdoc to junior fellowship, maybe onto further postdocs, and then intermediate fellowships, tenure track lectureships, all the way through to principal research fellows or professors, but also thinking about technical careers, laboratory managers, research technicians, and so on and so forth. Sadly, they've actually taken this down. I was trying to look through the MRC website this afternoon to see if I could provide a link. Unfortunately, they've taken it down because actually it's quite a useful way of thinking about the different paths and the different funding options which are available. Because what it also had was an interacting funding framework work, thinking about those postdoctoral awards. You've completed your PhD, you may be in your final year of your PhD, and you're thinking about next steps. And actually, there's quite a big split there between the going on to positions which are advertised by group leaders, looking at particular research things, research questions that they've already got funding for, or trying to establish yourself as an independent researcher at that earliest point of transition from student through to postdoctoral researcher. And I think one of the things that I really liked that Kalisha pulled up was the idea of building that track record of developing ideas and getting funding as you go along. And that sometimes those small pots, little bits of funding to support small projects, or even summer students to come into the lab to work with you, getting those smaller bits of funding, both as a PhD student and as a postdoctoral researcher, is a really, really valuable way of building up your track record and your experience of applying for funding and securing funding. Now, one of the confusing things about then going and looking for different funding routes is that there is a startling array of different places you can apply for. What I've done here is I've sort of pulled together an array of the different funding bodies that in dementia you could apply for if you were finishing up your PhD here in the UK. For the more clinically focused work, there's the NIHR, that's the National Institute for Health and Care Research, a government-funded body through the National Health Service here in the UK, the Medical Research Council, and a number of major charities: Alzheimer's Research UK, Alzheimer's Society, the Wellcome Trust, the Race Against Dementia Foundation, but also American funding bodies as well, and international funding bodies. The Alzheimer's Association, I have colleagues who have been funded as postdoctoral researchers, the Alzheimer's Association Fellowship Scheme, and the Bright Focus Scheme, both of which are US funding bodies, but they support fellowships to fund an individual and their ideas. Likewise, the EMBO, the European Molecular Biology Organization, fund traveling fellowships where you can visit other laboratories, get experience in other cultures, other research environments, all of which is a very, very valuable addition to that toolkit for developing your own ideas. Because at the heart of all of these, what really makes a difference in terms of securing funding, either for your first postdoctoral position, or if you're on a funded grant in a larger group, looking to develop your own ideas and secure a sort of intermediate fellowship. At the heart of all of that are the ideas. What is absolutely crucial is having a vision of the science that you want to carry out. And your job is to convince other people to give you funding to get that. I'm guessing that I'm fairly close to having the 10 minutes up. So I'm going to stop sharing, and hopefully that's stopped sharing and we're back to normal without too much of a sort of Doctor Who-like corridor.
No matrix.
How long was that? That was probably just bumping up towards 10 minutes.
Right, I was looking more so at the kind of general time, but we have plenty of time. So if you have any
that's all good. That's all good.
So I have a question.
Where do we go from here?
Of course, I have questions. I was going to see if there's anybody in the chat that has questions. I saw a couple folks starting to type and then didn't end up sending a message. So by no means, don't feel shy. There's no such thing as a bad question. And there's a lot of information, right? I wish that resource was still available. I think that was really neat, just like seeing the flow chart of it. It's nice to have something to visualize and to say, this is here, this is something that can be used.
I'm going to have another look on the MRC website and see if I can dig it out. Unfortunately, they sort of shifted from being the MRC to being part of a larger UK funding body, and I think it sort of got lost between all of that. But I can actually send the sort of copied slides of them. They were interactive and quite fun to play around with, but actually I can send around the slides of those because for me, it was good to have that kind of framework as to how an academic career works. Because when you finish your PhD, even when you're doing your PhD, actually it's not necessarily obvious as to what that framework is. So actually, for me, it was a great tool to talk to students and to postdocs about. Actually, this is a framework that, at least here in the UK, and it kind of overlaps a little bit with the US. Actually, this is a framework that an academic career sits within. So I really liked it. It's a shame they got rid of it.
It is. It is. I really liked it too. I see a couple people in the chat, both John and Anne-Marie, talking about how they're self-funded PhDs. So thinking about, postdocs and how to get some of that money is definitely on the top of everyone's mind. So I'll start with a question. I have my first one for Kalisha. And my first one for you is, from your experience with various funding bodies, I love seeing like the breakdown of everything. That was really quite neat. How can early career researchers tailor their proposals to stand out in competitive funding environments, especially when you're targeting specific issues like healthcare disparities?
That is a lovely question. I think I spend a lot of time looking at priorities. What is important to each particular institute or foundation or mechanism that you're looking at? Usually they give, especially with National Institutes of Health, they usually give you sort of this really long, like what we're looking for, what we're trying to do. And they also sort of bullet out a couple things. So each institute works a little different. Even with the foundational grants, usually there's a call, because anyone that knows the Alzheimer's Association knows that they tend to fund Patrick's type of work more so than mine. So there was a unique, specific call for individuals doing sort of community-based work. And so paying attention to what they say they're looking for and then trying to tailor it to that. I know there's been a lot of discussion here in the United States with the changing of the guard and whether or not the word health disparities will be something we're allowed to use in funding. I have even had some colleagues say that they will no longer do work specifically focused on an underrepresented racial group, or mentees have been encouraged not to. I think continuing to stay creative. As someone who does work specifically focused on African Americans, I'm not going to stop that work. I've told people what I'll do is I'll partner with someone else who doesn't necessarily care as much about race, and I'll boost up their numbers, and then I'll say, okay, I'll take that sample, and then I'll continue to do the work. So again, figuring out how to be creative, talking to mentors, getting somebody else's grant can be really, really helpful. That has been I've been so successful in having colleagues, friends whose work is a little different from mine to say, can I just look at your grant sort of as a template, right? Of how they laid out their tables, how did they set up their specific aims? How did they introduce different topics? So that would probably be the starting point, looking to see what the grant is looking for themselves. And then do you have someone who has been successful with that mechanism?
That's fabulous. Just by say, I like the point of like collaboration too, right? I feel like when you're applying for funding, it's usually kind of the last thing people are pushing is that collaboration, but we're really in this all together, right? And especially those folks that are looking at specifically health disparities. That's not a word I'll stop using by any means. But I take your point nonetheless, right? So like we have these resources and we can use them collectively. So I think that's a great point to take home. Thank you. My next question is for Patrick. So considering your extensive experience in neurodegenerative diseases, could you discuss some niche or emerging areas of research within this field that might offer untapped funding opportunities for new PhD students? Because I agree, like Kalisha's point about the kind of funding usually being tailored towards this kind of neurodegenerative scientific inquiry. So yeah, I'm curious what you think.
So a really interesting question, and actually, in a way, it follows on a little bit from what you were just discussing, Kalisha, because one of the things that for me stands out as a scientific opportunity, but also increasingly as a funding opportunity, is actually understanding neurodegeneration and the pathways leading to neurodegeneration beyond the Northern European, Caucasian, North American, and East Asian populations, where a huge amount of work has been done. And this is something that, so I sort of sit on the edge of the genome-wide association studies in Parkinson's and also in dementia, looking at individual genes. And one of the things that that is really I'm very excited about is understanding how genetic variation in populations that have historically been almost ignored, actually what that looks like, because that will tell us a huge amount. I work a little bit with the Aligning Science Across Parkinson's network, which funds a genetic program which has invested a lot of money working with groups and with clinicians and geneticists in South America, in sub-Saharan Africa, in South Asia, in Southeast Asia. And actually already you're beginning to see incredible insights coming through. And this for me, and I'm a chemist and a cell biologist by training and by inclination, I would say. Actually, it's incredibly exciting to see all this information come through, because already, even with a relatively early point in the opening up of this research, actually already we're beginning to understand things which we didn't understand because of the focus on the genetics of predominantly Northern Europeans, North American Caucasians and East Asians. And that for me is very, very exciting. And I think what that speaks to in terms of funding opportunities is that there's going to be a wealth of information coming through which needs interpreting. We need to understand how all of these pathways fit together and why one mutation in one background presents in one way and slightly differently in another. That will give us a much better insight as to actually what's going on in the brains of people who develop dementia or Parkinson's disease or motor neuron disease and so on and so forth. So for me, that's the area which is most exciting at the moment. You're beginning to see tailored calls, although as you were discussing, actually that is subject to change as new administrations come in, as different funding priorities come along. But for me, at a scientific level, that is one of the most exciting things that's coming through at the moment. And I think a huge potential to make a difference for people's lives across the globe in a way that actually hasn't really been done in the past. And I think that is really, really important. So I think there's scientific opportunities, but also funding opportunities there.
That's fabulous insight. I think it's like that's an important point you bring up, and of course the political climate is something that is unavoidable and to talk about and think about and be surrounded by, etc. But I think, you know, humbly saying perhaps, like I think it's our job as researchers to continue to push the need for that and combat, you know, that anti-intellectualism and so on and so forth, and say that this is much needed and life-changing research, and you know, to continue to push the need for those funding bodies. So my fingers are crossed. My next question is for Kalisha. So from your perspective, what strategies are effective for engaging stakeholders and community partners in research projects to attract more comprehensive and collaborative funding opportunities? You kind of mentioned, you know, collaborating with folks in terms of like, let me see how this is organized. Like, how are you putting this through? But I think some of those more community-based work, I'm really interested to hear about.
Yeah. You know, if I'm being completely honest, I thought I'm a Black woman. Can't be that hard to recruit Black people. They'll just like me. No, there's so much work that has to be done. And I think sometimes we think, oh, I can align with whatever group I'm recruiting. It'll be fine. No, they still have free will. Darn it. And so learning how to just be really authentically me, because people pick up on that, right? So they can tell whether they may not know exactly where the lie or the misconception is, but they can pick on when people are being genuine or not, and recognizing that sometimes I get it wrong, right? Sometimes I do have to apologize, but I definitely go into each meeting, each potential community partner, be it, so I have started a community advisory board that supports all the research that comes out of my lab, really. And I will say I started it after I got my K award, which is not when you're recommended to start your community advisory board, right? Usually it's like you have it, you bring research ideas to them. But honestly, it wasn't until I was taking a course in my K and hearing about you're doing research with underrepresented groups, Kalisha, it'd be really important to get their buy-in. And so organically, this community advisory board was sort of created. We meet quarterly. I do pay them hourly for their time because their expertise is valuable. And they get me together every quarter. They help me with marketing ideas, with recruitment, with different strategies, with thinking about the data, with thinking about next projects. Does it resonate with them? And so it's a group of physicians, nurses, social workers, as well as older adults interested in the work, older adults who have mild cognitive impairment, and then some of their care partners, so nieces, daughters, grandchildren. And so it's a really neat space, and I'm really excited about that. So I think that helps with thinking about it. The other thing is when you're in the research, people reach out to you, right? And they want to connect with someone that they're interested in. And so I think the other key message when wanting to connect with community partners is, are you able to describe your research at a level that matters to the community and that they understand? I'll never forget the first time I wrote a research article and I shared it with my family. My grandmother has high school education. And I think my cousin was with her at the time. So she was maybe about 10. And she's like, Kalisha, why didn't you write this in English? And of course, I'm like, I did. But there is sort of that scientific English and then just everyday language. And so really being able to talk it out with family members or someone in the community to make sure your messaging isn't so high level that people in the community don't get it. And so I do have a huge sort of just personal interest in making sure that the work that I do gets back to the communities that I want to serve. And so I think that's just part of who I am. And if you're intentional about it, people will help you. So I think that's all I got on that.
You say all you got as if you just didn't give us.
I think that's all I got.
Enormous wealth of knowledge. But I think that there's a lot there, right? Like that being authentic, and part of that is being like mindful of your audience, of like who is this research for, and who do I want it to benefit? You know, you want those folks to be able to read your work. And I think you hit on, you know, the point of valuing their lived experience as expertise, especially for some of those folks that are older adults living with dementia, their care partners. That's key, right? And to compensate them, right? It's one thing to recognize expertise as a point of knowledge and that sort of exchange, but to compensate them for that is fabulous. I see there's a question in the chat, so I'll put it out to both of you folks. So it is from Hend. How can I prepare myself during my PhD studies to increase my chances of securing a good fellowship after my PhD? And I'll let whoever wants to take that, take it away.
Kalisha, you go first. Go ahead.
Oh, so you go.
Oh, okay. So I think there are lots of things that you can do. I think one of the things that you will be measured by, whether it's right or wrong, is your outputs and the publications that you're associated with, and that's tough because a PhD is for training. But at the end of your PhD, when you're applying for fellowships, one of the things that the funding panels will be looking for is, have you been able to produce good science? And one of the ways in which you can demonstrate that is through peer-reviewed publications. So having that in your mind whilst you're doing your PhD, and I'm sure there are plenty of people around who, when you're doing your PhD who will remind you of this anyway, that is one of the things that we are measured on. So I think where there are opportunities to publish and to contribute to the literature, take them. Going back to the point that Kalisha raised when she was giving her introduction, if there are ways to secure small pots of funding, traveling fellowships, funding to attend a conference, something along those lines, those are really, really good ways of building up that track record and demonstrated track record of funding. So I think that's a really useful thing to do. Again, that can be challenging when you're trying to focus on actually doing your PhD, writing your thesis, and so on and so forth. But if there are opportunities that arise to get those smaller pots of monies, you can put them on your application. You can put them into that narrative that you build up about why should you fund me and my project. And I think the final point I'll raise is that idea of finding people to talk to about your science. Talk to people within your own group, within your own training environment, within your own institution, but take advantage of conferences, whether that's online or in person. Talk to people from other research fields, other groups, and bounce your ideas off them, because what really determines whether or not you're competitive for a fellowship is the idea that you're looking to get funded. And if your idea is strong, and the way to do that is to challenge that idea, talk to people who can critique it and say, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? Actually, that is really, really important part of it all. And establishing that network where there are people whose opinions you value and trust, who can give you that kind of advice, whether that's mentoring or coaching, whatever particular framework you want to use to do that. That is really, really, really valuable. I'm sure there are other things that I can mention, but I'll pass over to you, Kalisha, because I'm sure you've got lots of other stuff as well.
Great, wonderful. The only thing I will add, because I came into the PhD program with an idea, and I didn't really have anyone's lab I could work with, right? And so when you're in that position, and I don't know what your background is, but I'll just add that because I think Patrick gave great ideas. The only other thing I will say is that sometimes, like when I finished my PhD, I think but I'm nursing, and so it's a little different. So recognize that your disciplines are different. Recognize where you come into it is different. And I guess I have two things. The first thing is that because I was sort of creating this space, there was no one, to my knowledge, and even to my knowledge this day, although my mentor hates for me to say it, that was working on African-American dementia dyads specifically. There wasn't a paper I could pull from. So I became the one that started that lane here, at least in the United States, or any publications I'm working. And so when you're in a space where you're sort of blazing your path and creating it, just know that your publication record will be a little shorter than everybody else's. It won't quite line up. You will still need to publish. You will still need to show that you have a great idea, but you can't necessarily measure yourself against other people. You will eventually catch up and potentially pass them, but just know, be kind to yourself. The PhD is a very hard time, so be kind. The other thing I thought about was the comment you said, a good fellowship. And I thought, good is what you make it, right? So good for you may not be good for me or good for Patrick. So really know that you have something to offer to these fellowships. Really know that your science, your lived experience, all of that makes you uniquely you. And so when you sell yourself in a way that only you can, that aligns with whatever different fellowships you're applying to. But yeah, I wish you much success. You've got this.
Exactly. I also wish you success. I see we have 5 minutes left, so if there's any questions left in the chat, otherwise, rather than asking any more questions, I'll just ask you folks if you have any final thoughts. So we'll give the folks that are here with us just a minute to put in any last burning questions they have. And then otherwise, just an awfully sweet take-home message. It's quite interesting hearing like just the kind of different countries as well too. Like Kalisha, you were talking about a lot about the numbers of the grants, and I was like, oh my gosh, like you've got those numbers memorized of like the K something number grant and that kind of thing. We just kind of have some like broad funding bodies, and they have a bunch of names, I guess, of the different kinds of grants, but otherwise it's pretty specific to the
very mechanism specific here, and it matters when you think about promotion and tenure. So it is ingrained in my brain because
exactly. And maybe I'm living blissfully unaware as a first-year PhD student too, but a lot of our funding is that kind of like
success.
Thank you. Fingers crossed. It's very nice to be able to hear from both of you as I'm just nodding like a bobblehead the whole time. Like, oh yeah, it's a pretty nice point. Made a couple of notes to myself. I don't see any more questions in the chat. So if you folks have anything that you'd like to add, perhaps maybe if you had some advice for your younger self as you're coming out of your PhD, or just anything really, whatever you'd like to share.
I have a lot of imposter syndrome. Oh, so much. I just knew somebody was going to tap me on my shoulder and say, how did you sneak into this institution, girl? You're not meant to be here. And I'm probably just now, I mean, I'm what? I graduated in 2019. So yeah, I'm just now probably starting to come into my own in 2025 and be like, yes, you are supposed to be here. You are brilliant. You are great. So if anything I could say, probably mentorship. We did not talk about that. Mentorship makes or breaks your PhD experience. I have a dear friend who never finished her PhD. She is ABD, and it is very much related to mentorship. So having a mentor that shares resources about funding, that makes sure they are setting you up for success. I highly recommend writing some sort of a grant in your PhD program. Small, big, just write something, because again, you're never going to have quite that much support when it comes to grantsmanship. So write something, because then, as you saw, because my something didn't really get funded, not the big something, the little somethings did, it sets you up wherever your next path is to say, I've done this before. I know what to do. I wasn't working from a blank piece of paper. I had words on paper that I could revise and edit. And so again, mentorship matters, and then just writing some sort of a grant.
Thank you for hitting on the mentorship piece too, right? I was watching one of these salons recently, and the question was, would you rather having a good supervisor or a good topic? And people were split. There's two presenters, and they both went in different directions. But I'm definitely on the side of supervision matters, and that can make or break. Some of my best and brightest friends didn't complete their degrees because of a lack of good supervision. Let's call it. Patrick, any final thoughts?
Final thoughts. So I'm sort of looking back as advice to a younger self. I think that one of the things that I'd re-emphasize is perseverance and confidence. So have confidence in your ideas and your science and your ability. And I think that touches on the imposter syndrome, which I think actually is very, very common across science. Something that every so often I'll wake up in the morning and go, you know what? I don't think this is going to go. The train I'm on is coming to a halt now, and I'm going to have to get off and do something else. So that is something that having that confidence in your ideas and yourself, that's really, really important. The perseverance is, you are going to have grants and fellowships rejected. I have lost count of how many grants I've had not funded. The first grant I wrote is when I was setting up my own group, got absolutely awful scores. It was sent to the Wellcome Trust, got bounced back with it was not a pleasant experience. But actually learning from that, and as you were saying, Kalisha, actually writing something and putting it in, there is no substitute for actually doing that. And even if for the first couple of times it does it, you will learn each time you do that. And I think that's really important. And having that perseverance and that resilience to keep on going and keep plugging away, that is difficult. There are grants and areas of research I'm working on now that I spent 10 years trying to get funding for. And in the end, it will pay off, but it requires a huge amount of resilience and perseverance to do that. So try and build up that bank of perseverance and resilience, because for better or for worse, you will need it as you go through the process of applying for fellowships, applying for your own funding.
Fabulous advice. Thank you so very much, everyone. That's the end of our time. So I just wanted to reiterate, thank you so very much for both of you. As I mentioned, even just learning here, like sitting with you folks, I feel like I've learned so much, and I really, really do appreciate the time you take, because, you both talked about mentorship, and this is part of it, right? Sharing that information that you have and all this lived experience, it's really, really valuable to us younger researchers, and to anyone, right, who wants to learn about what our kind of research world is like. So thank you so very much to both of you, Kalisha and Patrick. I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Hannah. You've been a great chair. It's been great talking to you.
Yes,
thank you so very much. Fabulous.
Lovely to see you all, and maybe catch you soon. Maybe at AAC sometime, Kalisha. Who knows?
Maybe. We need to figure out when we can overlap.
Exactly.
Yes,
exactly.
See you soon, folks. Take care, folks.
Bye now.
Bye.